I've made it clear that we will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq.
Well, Barack Obama has just given his third Oval Office address, and it was brief and in a way kind of to the point. His objective was to persuade Americans and the world that he has a strategy, in his words, to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS. Much of the 14-minute address, however, was devoted to what America would not do in that end. There would be no US military boots on foreign soil. There would be no formal declaration of war, this being strictly a counter-terrorism operation. And there would be no US detente, it seems, with the regimes in Syria and Iran to unite against their common enemy. In that regard, his address was as much about reassuring Americans it was not about to be sucked into another Middle Eastern quagmire, as it was about setting out a strategy to destroy ISIS. So what then is Mr. Obama's strategy? Well, it consists of 4 elements. First, more US airstrikes in Iraq and new strikes in Syria. Second, more US military support and training to anti-ISIS forces on the ground, including the new Iraqi government and moderate Syrian groups. Third, more intelligence resources in the region, including presumably drones and special forces operations. And finally, more humanitarian aid to the victims of ISIS barbarism. His chief takeaway, however, was that the US would lead through coalition. Other countries would do the fighting. The US would act as the lead strategist. Did this amount to a strategy? Well, it's hard to say. Almost everything Mr. Obama announced is what the US has already been doing, and was doing a couple of weeks ago, when the president unwisely let slip to the media that he didn't yet have a strategy to defeat ISIS. That slip, of course, earned him a lot of mockery. And critics will say that Wednesday night's Oval Office address was little more than a shopping list of reactive tactics rather than a strategy. Supporters, of course, will say that Mr. Obama laid out a sensible and achievable list of tools to defeat ISIS in the long term without hyping its threat to the US in the short term. Indeed, Mr. Obama went out of his way to say that ISIS posed no immediate threat to America.
This is a core principle of my presidency. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
Which of them is right? Well, ultimately time will tell, but assessing this purely as a piece of political theater, it seems unlikely Mr. Obama will win over many of his doubters with tonight's Oval Office address. He announced nothing new, and he very much avoided the Churchillian rhetoric that his detractors had been calling for. As Mr. Obama implied, the struggle against ISIS is likely to go on long after he has left office. It's a fair bet that he will need to flesh out his ISIS strategy considerably more between now and then.